Morning. Morning, everybody. Hello. How's it going? Boop. Boop. Good morning. Okay. Let's make our coffee. Na, 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 na. Yeah, it is nice. It does. The sun is pretty peaceful this morning, but calm. How's everyone feeling? Everyone got their coffee ready? You know, all that jazz. And all that jazz, all these and roll my stockings down. And all that jazz. Start the car and go up a spot where the gym is cold, but the piano's hot. It's a noisy hall where there's a nightly brawl. Yes, walk while that's brilliant, actually. I love that. I do, when I go for walks or runs, I do like to listen to, it is pretty funny, Amanda, I do like to listen to audiobooks, so it's kind of similar to that, actually. Listening to book club, oh my gosh, what's my hair doing? Oh, it's because it was tucked into there. Listening to book club while you're walking around is basically the same as that, right? Kind of. You're getting a story, so. Why are you making so much noise, do you think? Do you think you could, stop that? I just recently descaled the machine, so it's not that. It's just a loud machine. That's what it comes down to. Hello. It's just a loud machine, and it won't ever not be loud no matter what I do. Yeah. But it gives me coffee, so I don't complain too much about the noise. Because I need the coffee, and I want the coffee. So, what am I even supposed to do? Just suffer through it, I guess. It's not really suffering, it's just whatever. It's just whatever. Are we all ready to read? Are you guys enjoying this book so far? I am. I'm enjoying the book so far. I need to give this to the people that want to listen to the book. There we go. You passed your reading goal for this year. Me too, Naisa. What was yours and what did you hit? I have a thing I need to post about my reading wrap up. Did you get your reading wrap up, Naisa? What was everyone's reading goal for the year and what did they end up with? I still have 800 pages to meet my 10,000 page goal. You can do it. 800 is not that much over the holidays. My goal was 120. I'm at 128. Yeah, that's awesome. My goal was 75 because I wasn't sure how much I'd be able to accomplish with work and everything, but and so far I'm at I think 117 or 118. And by the end of the year, I'll probably get to 120 once I finish the book that I'm reading right now, book club, etc. So yeah, not too bad. You are the loudest machine. I had to re-listen to a previous chapter prior to this because I got distracted for work. Hey, at least they're there to listen to, right, Amanda? That's the glory of them being there, is that at least you get that. They do. Work does interfere with books. Imagine if I didn't have a job, how much I would get reading done. It'd be crazy. If I didn't have a job, I would get so many books read. Yeah. I do sometimes listen to audiobooks when I'm working, but I can't listen to an audiobook while I'm recording videos, obviously, because I need my phone. I can't listen to an audiobook while I'm answering emails because it distracts me. So I can only do it when I'm like making slime that doesn't require like brain, you know? So it just depends on what I'm doing. Sometimes I can do it when I'm packing orders if they're like easy orders, but sometimes not. Just depends. Just depends. Yeah. I think I made too much milk. Oops. Oopsies. But look how nice Secret Husband's coffee looks. Delightful. I love the little puff of foam at the top. Oh, it's so yummy. I just saw news pop for the Super Great. They are? Wait, are you serious, Jen? This morning when I was checking, they hadn't decided that yet. When did they decide? Wait, tell me more. Tell me freaking everything, Jen. Are you being serious? They are going to hear it for sure? That would give us a couple more months at least. I was thinking we had 1 month left. Oh my gosh. That's amazing, Jen. Did it give any dates, like when they're considering hearing it? Because like someone was mentioning that it could be as late as June. You saw it on CNN? Oh my God, you guys. I could cry. I would be so happy. It would literally like save my ability to pay bills. January 10th. Ugh. Okay. Thank you for the info, but that is not the date I wanted to hear. Ugh. All right, so they're trying to do it fast. Oh, dang it. That really stinks. That is not the news we wanted. Morning, Ray. Morning, Avery. I was really hoping it was going to be more like June or something, you know? Well, we'll take what we can get, I guess, right? I mean, I guess it's better than nothing. On Fable, they created a bookcase with all your books you read this year. Oh, that's cute. We're talking about the fact that I guess they announced this morning, Avery, that the Supreme Court is going to hear the TikTok case. January 10th, which we were hoping that they would push it a little later so that we could keep TikTok a little longer. But I'm glad that they're going to hear it at least. I mean, it's not ideal. Well, the hearing is January 10th. They might not decide until June. Yeah, that's true. That's true, Jen. Gosh, I'll just cross my fingers and knock on wood and all of that, because I don't think people understand, like, it's really gonna suck for so many people. You know what I mean? Like V from Under the Desk News has said it, but like, it will tank the economy. Like, so many of us will not have the same ability to run our business that we currently have. Arguments set over day, unclear how quickly. Yeah, that all makes sense. It's just, it's hard, you know? So many businesses made on TikTok. That's right, Tough Cookies, that's right. And think about, I mean, like, I'm not one of these people, but think about people who live on the income from TikTok alone. I think it is too, Jen. I think it is too. Because as many people have pointed out, if this was really a national security issue, then why did the presidential candidates get to have TikTok accounts and that's okay? If it's really a security issue, why are all of the candidates and all of the Congress people and all of the senators on TikTok? It's a little sus, if you ask me. Why are they here? Why do they have accounts? It's okay to have it on their phones. It's not a national security issue for them. That's weird. If anyone's going to get banned from it, it should be the government people, not me. I don't have any secrets. I just make slime. You know what I mean? I don't care if anyone, fine, tell China how I make slime. See if I care. You know, I tell everybody. I don't hide anything. I'm very open about how I make stuff. I teach classes on it. So join us, China. Let's make slime. I mean, like, you know, I'm not the security risk. How come the President of the United States has accounts? Exactly, Ray. Exactly. Of course. Morning. Yeah. Yeah. So that's my dearest hope, is that we don't actually lose this. It's been it's also the easiest platform for community. That's why we do book club here. You know what I mean? Like, book club is not a money-making thing. We do this for funsies. Like, this is our, like, soul thing, right? It's just the easiest platform for it. I am sad. I am sad. But it's good news in that they didn't want to hear it before, so at least they have agreed to hear it. I will accept what I can get. You know? Gotta take what you can get. All right, let us read some more today. Silver lining you won't have to fight with. That's true. That is a silver lining, Jen. It is. That is a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, I'll give you that one. Really quickly before we start, anyone who didn't see the post that I made on Patreon about this, book club is going to be early on Friday because I have a doctor's appointment on Friday that was originally scheduled for after book club, but they called me yesterday afternoon and the doctor can only see me at 9 a.m., which is when book club is usually, like, the middle of book club is 9 a.m. So I'll just do it early and I'll upload it right away for anyone who misses it. If you're on the East Coast, it might be even better for you. If you're on the West Coast, it's probably going to be a little bit hinky because it'll start at like 7:30. And then I just need to be off by 8:30 to go to my appointment at 9. So that is that. The appointment was supposed to be at 10:30, which would have been fine for book club. But hey, Sloth, no, you didn't miss anything. We were just chit-chatting just a smidge. But anyway, we're going to read chapter 10 today, so let's get into it. It'll be during my coffee time for Central Time. See, that's perfect. Why not? Join us for coffee time. This is one of the longer chapters, so let's enjoy it and see what we got. Rachel craned one ear toward the door, listening for voices rising up from the kitchen or footsteps tromping up and down the hallway. But her first impression was correct. Jacob and her parents had left the building. She threw off her covers, taking deep breaths. She mustered the energy to sit up. She did not feel good. Her head was groggy. Her arms and legs felt like they had been loaded down with weights, and for some reason her left kneecap was swollen. If it hadn't been for Jacob Greenberg, she honestly would have stayed in bed. But alas, the thought of leaving Jacob alone with her parents made her nervous. She didn't want him spilling the beans on what had happened the night before in the bathroom, or worse, talking about her volunteering for the Matzah ball. It could raise all sorts of problematic questions. She had no choice. She needed to push through. Heading to the kitchen, Rachel rummaged in a pantry. She pulled out a sugar-free Red Bull and chugged it down, and then rifling through the medicine drawer in the bathroom, she added a caffeine pill. The combination probably would have sent most folks spinning off the walls, but caffeine barely made a dent in Rachel's fatigue. She would have stopped there, but she knew her body, so she loaded up on painkillers, a mixture of Advil and Tylenol, in order to ward off any migraines or joint pain that might arise in the next 3 hours. And finally, because she had taken all the medicine on an empty stomach, she finished her breakfast by grabbing a croissant from a pink box on the counter. Back in her bedroom, she pulled on a blue dress and black microfiber stockings. There were times that Rachel couldn't believe she didn't just drop dead from all the crap she loaded into her body. This was one of the great ironies of her life with chronic illness. Marathon runners keeled over from heart attacks at age 33. Healthy young executives with their entire lives ahead of them were suddenly diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Rachel was just chronically ill. She was exhausted every freaking day in a varying degree of disabling intensities. Thus, she was certain, absolutely positive, that she was going to live forever. Baruch Hashem. She did one final check in the mirror. Her hair was a disaster. Relatable content. Her curls, having been slept on, were now frizzed and angled out in several different directions. Oh, relatable content. Rachel didn't want to upset her parents by using the curling iron on Shabbat, so she went and settled for the next best thing, a black headband with a large blue flower that her great-aunt Sylvia had given her for her 13th birthday. It was quite possibly the ugliest damn headband in the entire world, but it would have to do. Rachel arrived at the synagogue right in the middle of the Torah reading. Sneaking into her father's office, she grabbed her talabot bag from the top shelf and headed towards the main sanctuary. She was met by Paul, the usher, who scooted right over in his electric wheelchair the minute that he saw her. "Shabbat shalom," Rachel said warmly. "Shabbat shalom," the words came slowly and stilted. "How are you this morning?" "I'm good," Rachel chirped back. "And you?" "Good. Same seat as always?" "Yeah, that would be perfect." "Okay, follow me." Rachel obeyed, following after Paul as he zipped her toward the back row. Paul was a fixture in her father's synagogue. He was so proud of his electric wheelchair, so proud of his job, his ushering attendees to their seats on Shabbat morning. In truth, the job was truly unnecessary. Even for a popular synagogue on Long Island, there were plenty of open seats. But Rachel understood why Paul showed up every single Saturday morning to volunteer his services. Everyone needed to feel valuable. "Here you go," Paul said, using one finger to point to the aisle. "Thank you, Paul." He left, and Rachel took her seat. As always, she took the very last pew in her father's synagogue. Most people assumed it was because she had a tendency to mosey in late, but in reality, and like Paul zipping around shul behind her, Rachel stayed in the back because of her disability. Rachel loved synagogue. Stepping through the doors of the main sanctuary, hearing the ancient words of Hebrew and Aramaic, it felt like an extension of home, and she didn't want to be late or miss shul as often as she did. But for Rachel, the issue was far more complicated than being a lapsed Jew or wishing to sleep in. She found synagogue absolutely exhausting. It wasn't just getting up early and getting dressed, but it was all the things that came with attendance. It was the music and the singing, which even on a good day felt like somebody crashing cymbals against her ears, and the Shabbat Shalom hugs and the catch-up conversations. These are things she once loved but could no longer tolerate. That part kept her at home, however, and it came in the form of two simple words: "Please rise," often uttered by the rabbi or the cantor. The tradition of rising to your feet whenever the ark was open and a constant up and down left her in the wave of dizzying spells. The back pew allowed her to simply sit through services away from peering eyes. She could exit in quiet tandem with her disease, free from scorn or judgment, without some old lady whispering loudly to her husband, "Look how rude the rabbi's daughter is." It had happened more than once because, unlike Paul in his wheelchair, Rachel's disability was invisible. After finishing her prayers, Rachel took a seat. Her eyes scanned the front pews and landed on Jacob. He was sitting in the front row alone. Her mom had abandoned him. Rachel watched him, her curiosity growing. It was interesting, really. Jacob hadn't been particularly religious at Camp Ahava. Watching him now, though, his shoulders squared, his face angled up to the eternal flame, she got the sense that he was considering something precedent. There were things Rachel knew about Jacob's life. She had learned it from his letters after summer camp and later via her mother and the Camp Ahava rumor mill. She knew that he had moved to Paris with his French mother while his American father remained in New York. She remembered hearing that his parents had been involved in a particularly nasty divorce. And looking at Jacob now, thinking back on their youth together, she couldn't help viewing their past through a different lens. It must have really been hard for him. She chewed on her lower lip, debating her options. Chronic illness had softened her to the potential unseen pain of others, and she considered the small, almost infinitesimal possibility that maybe her mother was right. She was being unfair. At the very least, she could attempt to be cordial to this man. So she glanced down at her watch. Services were almost over. She could handle this. "Hey," Rachel said, and slid down in the seat next to Jacob. Jacob twisted in his seat, surprised. "Hey, you're here." Rachel squinted. "Yeah. Where else would I be?" "Well, your mom said you don't normally come to Saturday morning services." "Oh," she uncrossed her arms. "Yeah, normally I don't." "Well," Jacob smiled, his red flushing his cheeks, "I'm happy you're here." The moment shifted, like Hatzi Kaddish, the prayer for transitions, floating between them. Their knees, by accident, bumped together and remained touching. Some spark, some happy memory from far away that floated its way into her heart. Rachel swallowed hard. Yeah, me too. Jacob was surprised to see her, surprised at the strange feeling that crept up in his chest, a mixture of nerves and excitement. She looked adorable. A smile spread across his face, wide and wide, as he took in the full picture of Rachel now. The ridiculous headband she was wearing, black velvet with a giant blue tulle flower at the top, the large tallit that draped across her shoulders, swinging down to the top of her knees. It was the oddest juxtaposition, the playfulness of the headband against the seriousness of the prayer shawl. It was so quintessentially Rachel, complicated, yet quirky. I like your tallit, he said. Is that Rachel? Oh, wait. Yeah. Is that... Hey, Rachel? Miriam, she said, pulling at the edges to display the pattern. Oh, I see what he's asking. He's asking if the pattern on it is of the biblical figure of Rachel, not her. Okay, I was confused. An abstract female shape with a tambourine danced around the blue waves, while several other women followed her. Rachel's the one who married Jacob. Jacob smiled. Well, it's beautiful. Thanks. An old lady leaned in to shush them, and like two kids caught in some crime, they shared a simple, guilty giggle together before returning to listening to the Torah reader. 40 minutes later, services were over, and the entire congregation streamed into the adjoining banquet hall for the Kiddush luncheon. Jacob joined them, following after Rachel. Laid out in the center, in buffet style, were all the typical Ashkenazi favorites: bagels, onions, plain and sesame, rested on a platter decorated in flowers, cream cheeses, salad sat in a bowl with giant spoons. It all looked delicious, but everyone, from the smallest mobile toddler to the oldest woman in a walker, was making their way to the 3 platters of lox. Wow, Rachel said, gazing over the spread. Someone really splurged on Kiddush today. Jacob shifted his loafers. He decided not to mention that the person who'd sponsored Kiddush today was him. Suddenly, a voice called out in the crowd. Rabbi Goldblatt was waving his daughter over. "Rachel!" he shouted, holding a silver Kiddush cup in his hand. "Do us all the honor, will you please?" Rachel groaned. "Oh, gosh, excuse me." Jacob watched as she took her place front and center, and the entire congregation gathered round as she lifted a cup into the air. She didn't even need the book. The Hebrew words, the ancient hymn, fell from her tongue as simple as happy birthday. It would take Jacob a week or maybe months to learn the same prayer, and probably years to deliver it with the same kind of confidence. But Rachel finished the Kiddush, and her father, in one of those sweet and unconscious moments, briefly touched the back of her head before allowing her to depart. It was such a small yet sweeping gesture, the kind of thing a father would do to his small child, not a grown woman. But in Judaism, as Shmuel often made a point to remind Jacob, you weren't really considered an adult unless you were married. It didn't matter if you ran a multi-million-dollar business or even owned several homes. There was something about committing to another person, starting a home and a family, that separated boys from men or girls from women. Rachel returned to her position at Jacob's side. "You're really good at that," he said. She laughed. "Well, years of practice." He stumbled on the words. "It reminds me of, Camp Ahava." Her face was a mask, unmoving. She twisted to grab 2 plates. "I think it's time to get something to eat." Jacob didn't know what he'd said wrong. Rachel was suddenly flying through the buffet line, loading up heaps and mountains of food. Jacob followed after her, trying to keep up. She headed toward the table where a man in a wheelchair was sitting. Jacob recognized him as the usher who had brought him and Dr. Rubenstein to their seats earlier that morning. "Paul," Rachel said, sitting down between the 2 men, "this is Jacob. Jacob, Paul." "Hello," Jacob said, offering his hand, and Paul lifted his hand into the air, a plastic fork held like a chopstick between 2 paralyzed fingers. "Hello." "Do you need any help, Paul?" Rachel asked casually. "I'm fine," he said, and dug his fork into the food. "You look beautiful today." "Oh, Paul," Rachel touched her heart, "you are my favorite flirt." Paul grinned from ear to ear. "You too, Rachel." It was interesting watching Rachel interact with Paul. Except for last night in the bathroom, she was rather stuffy with Jacob. She seemed guarded and on edge constantly. With Paul, Rachel relaxed. She practically floated. Paul stopped flirting with Rachel long enough to turn his attention to Jacob. "What kind of car do you drive, Jacob?" he asked. Jacob was surprised by the question. Car?" Rachel explained.
Paul's favorite topic is cars. Oh, Jacob said, taking his cue. Well, actually, I don't have a car. Paul was shocked. No car? No, I don't need one. He shrugged happily. I live in Paris. Paul pointed to Rachel. Like you in Manhattan. Yep, Rachel nodded her head. We're both city dwellers. For as much difficulty as Paul had speaking due to his disease, it didn't stop him from trying. He spent the next 45 minutes regaling Jacob and Rachel with the intricate details of the Parisian metro system. He knew so much about European mass transportation, how he knew so much about European mass transportation was anybody's guess. Jacob, quite politely, held his own. He happily answered questions, going into great detail about the streets, the parking spaces, and the maps. Paul was delighted, and Rachel, well, he looked over at one point to find her chin folded in the palm of her hand, watching them intently. After some time, an aide appeared to take Paul home, and Jacob finally found himself alone with Rachel. You're really good with him, Rachel said quietly, and Jacob returned the compliment. He was good with me. Rachel smiled. It was warm and genuine, and Jacob couldn't help smiling along with her. He watched her eyes drift over to the exit. Outside the main sanctuary, Paul was being loaded up into an accessibility transport. A lot of people don't see Paul, she said thoughtfully, because of his disability, because sometimes he can be sort of quirky and excessive about his interests. But you know what the Midrash says? God only works through broken vessels. Oh, that's really beautiful. I'm not religious, but I think that's very sweet. I'm going to highlight it because I like that. Jacob swallowed. A lump of something hard and uncomfortable worked its way down from the center of his throat. Midrash? Is that some, Jewish philosophy? Kind of, she shrugged. It's more like biblical commentary, but if you think about it, brokenness is all over the Bible. Moses had a speech impediment, and God requested half shekels and not full shekel from all the Israelites. Even the world was created from something unformed and void. God could just as easily have said, I create this universe from nothing, but he didn't. So, there's probably a lesson to be learned from that. Jacob blinked. She was so smart. Rachel pushed him into conversations that were challenging, a rarity for a man more accustomed to screaming over loud music than having in-depth conversations with a woman at a table. Anyway, Rachel said, staring down at her lap, I don't want to bore you. No, you're not boring me. I find it fascinating. He found her fascinating. So what's the point of it? What? Brokenness. Oh, well, Rachel considered the question. I'm going to do something super Jewy here and throw the question back at you. Why do you think God prefers broken things? Maybe it means, I don't know, maybe it's because God loves us no matter what? She cocked her head. That's a very Christian way to look at a Jewish God. Oh, I suppose that makes sense. Jacob shrugged simply. I did go to Catholic school. Wait, Rachel squinted. You went to Catholic school? Yep, 3 years, he explained. Grades 10 through 12. He could see the question lingering on her face. How the heck does a nice Jewish boy, someone who went to Camp Ahava for one summer, wind up in Catholic school? And your parents were okay with that? Rachel asked. Listen, my mom was just doing her best. What about your dad? Dad didn't really have much say, Jacob said honestly, and he quickly moved the topic away from his father. But my bubby, when she found out, she had a total conniption. Well, Rachel said and nodded her head. Who can argue with your bubby? Yeah, exactly, Jacob laughed. He was careful not to reveal any more of the story than that. He didn't want Rachel to know the truth about him, but suffice to say, after his father abandoned him and his mother had no choice but to move them back to France, Jacob struggled. The same problems that he had brought with him to Camp Ahava that summer followed him into his teen years, and in Paris, he became a full-fledged disaster. Looking back on it now, he could see how his anger was an extension of his grief. He would talk back to his mother, get in trouble at school, miss dinner, all like his father. He recalled standing on their balcony, lighting up a cigarette in front of her, a habit she absolutely despised. He caused his mother every possible form of grief that he could manage, daring her to stop loving him, wanting her to prove this thing he already knew about himself. Getting kicked out of school was just another way to hurt her. He went through 4 schools, in fact, before landing at the only place in Paris left willing to take him. A Catholic school. Was it weird? Rachel asked, playing with a curl of her hair. It was odd at first, Jacob admitted, before adding, but the priests were pretty nice, and they actually wound up helping me through some stuff. Plus, I learned all about catechism, so it wasn't a total loss. I don't even know what that is. It's the doctrine of the Catholic faith. Oh, like their Talmud? No, I don't think so, though I don't really know enough about the Talmud to actually compare them. Rachel shook her head. I can't even imagine going to Catholic school where there are like crosses everywhere. Quite a few. Did they hit you with rulers? Only when I really deserved it, she gasped. I'm kidding, Jacob said, and he couldn't help but laugh. It was pretty normal aside from the fact that it was Catholic, and like I said, the priests actually helped me through some stuff. One priest in particular, Father Sebastian, was actually the person who got me interested in music. It was Father Sebastian who had taught Jacob that there could be healthier outlets for his anger, and after school, during breaks between classes, he educated Jacob on styles beyond pop, introducing him to opera, heavy metal, and jazz. And music quickly became an escape, a way to make sense of his confusing feelings, and later, as an adult, he turned that passion into business. Wow, Rachel said. He could see the writer in her thinking through this, putting herself in his size 12 loafers. I've never been to Catholic school, Rachel said simply. Shocker, Jacob said, but I'll tell you a secret. She fiddled with a string coming off the tablecloth. I have watched a Christmas movie. Jacob leaned in, whispering, was it any good? Rachel exploded with laughter, full-blown hysterics, having to cover her mouth and gasp for air. Jacob couldn't help himself. Just the sight of her in such a sheer state of joy filled his heart with joy. She didn't laugh enough, he realized, and he liked being the reason for her smile. You know, Rachel said, leaning in, I used to think the whole world was Jewish. You're kidding me. Jewish family, Jewish school, Jewish summer camp, Jewish friends. I even played on Jewish sports teams. Her eyes landed on her parents. Nobody did it on purpose, of course. There just wasn't any space left in my life for the rest of the world. He noted a certain sadness in her voice. Well, Rachel, he said, reaching across the table to take her hands, I fear being the one to break this to you, but the whole world is not Jewish. She laughed again. Whatever sadness was inside her dissipated, and that's when he realized that they were holding hands, and sparks flew through his body at the feeling of her warm skin on his own. He'd forgotten how warm she could feel, and an instinct started rising in him to hold on to it forever. Her eyes floated to their hands over the tables where the congregants were gathered. Quickly, she sat up in her seat and pulled away. Oh, I'm sorry, Jacob said. I didn't mean to overstep any boundaries. No, it's okay. She shook off his words nervously. You didn't. It's just people are watching. You're not allowed to hold hands with a boy when you're 30 years old. She shifted in her seat. It's more complicated than that. He remembered this about Rachel at Camp Ahava, too. She was always so worried about what other people thought. She made him promise up and down in every way to Morning Minya to keep their relationship a secret. And he had started their prank war, of course, by pushing her into the lake. But it was her idea to keep the facade going even when they started to like one another. Jacob had done his best to honor her wishes, but it was hard. He liked her more than anything in the world, and he wanted to shout it from the treetops surrounding their camp. He wanted everyone in Bunk 7B to know about it, too, but still, he did his best to secure her privacy. So what happens now? Jacob asked. Well, now, Rachel said, sitting back up, we go back to the house and my mother tries to feed you again. Then we all go to our rooms for a Shabbat nap, after which we wake up and we do the Havdalah, and my mother sends you back to New York with more food than you could ever possibly eat. There seems to be a theme here. Eating, Rachel nodded. Eating is the theme. And then he felt the need to confirm things with her. I'll see you on Monday morning? Yeah, she smiled gently. I guess so. Damn, if they weren't in the middle of shul with half the congregants nosily watching, he might have leaned in and kissed her. Listen, Jacob, Rachel said, edging closer, I was wondering if maybe I could ask you a favor. Another one? He liked where this was going. She rolled those perfect brown eyes of hers. I know, just hear me out, okay? I know this sounds weird, I know it makes no sense at all, but if the topic happens to come up with my parents, could you please just not mention that I'm volunteering for the Matzah ball? Jacob sat back in his seat, totally confused. Why? I think it'll just be better if it's a surprise, you know, like if I show at the party and bam, there I am. Think about how happy it'll make them if I just like show up there. Jacob felt his heart sink in his chest. What the hell had just happened? 1 minute he was talking to Rachel, the deep and purposeful and honest, and then, in the blink of an eye, the woman from the bathroom appeared again. Rachel, nobody hides volunteering for a Jewish event from their parents. I know, but please, Jacob, I need you to do this. For me? She was touching him, clutching his knee, sending shivers up and down his thighs, and he wanted to deny her, tell her that she could take the deal and shove it, but he also didn't want her to pull her hand away. All right, on one condition, he said. All right, anything. Tell me the truth. He pinned his gaze on those tempting pink lips of hers. Tell me the real reason you're so desperate to get a ticket to the Matzah ball. She let go of his knee, sitting up in her seat. What? I mean, what? Why? Because this is all very dramatic for a Hanukkah party, Rachel, and frankly, I'm beginning to get worried. Are you using my party to, like, deal drugs, or are you wanted by the mob? Blink twice if you're in trouble. She did not blink twice. Instead, her eyelids went wide, and she looked up at the ceiling. It might not have been obvious to others, but he saw through it. He could tell she was weaving up a tale inside of her mind, planning her next lie. Look, she said finally, just because I'm a top secret spy for the Israeli Defense Force, I don't want you blowing my cover with my parents. He raised an eyebrow in her direction. You're a spy. Huh. Yeah, a trained assassin, she whispered. Mossad. In a flower headband. Rachel leaned in dramatically. I've killed 70 men with this headband. It took Jacob a few seconds to get it, but he laughed. He shook his head, annoyed with himself. He knew she was joking, but something about Rachel felt dangerous, like allowing her into his life with the inconsistencies and lies would lead to something worse. And yet, he couldn't refuse her. This was Rachel Rubenstein Goldblatt, his first love, his first kiss, the girl who had saved his life. He owed her something. Most of all, though, as was his nature, he wanted to help her. Okay, Rachel, he said, throwing his hands up, you win. The Jewish goodbye at Rachel's house took 45 minutes to complete. There were all kinds of traditional aspects of delay. Many thanks and gratitudes, promises to do it again, to see each other soon, before Dr. Rubenstein offered up one last hug for the 10,000th time. And eventually Jacob made it to get out the front door. Well, Dr. Rubenstein said, shutting the door behind him, he is just lovely. Ima, Rachel knew where this was heading. What? Dr. Rubenstein said defensively. Such a lovely neshama, such a warm and gentle soul. He will make a wonderful husband to someone someday. Rachel rolled her eyes. She knew exactly what her mother was doing, putting ideas in her head, trying to butter her up like that box of croissants she sent Jacob home with. It wasn't her mother's fault entirely. After the Holocaust, in which so many Jewish families were murdered or displaced, Dr. Rubenstein saw it as her personal mission to help repopulate the world with Jewish babies. And now, as a top reproductive endocrinologist in New York City, she looked at her daughter the way she looked at all her patients coming in after years of unexplained infertility and failed IVF treatments. A wealth of potential, I didn't mean to kick you guys. A wealth of potential, of happiness and mazel locked up inside a willful womb. Rachel was an easy target. Dr. Rubenstein bent down to fiddle with the snow boots by the front door, and it was so nice of Jacob to sponsor Kiddush today. Wait, what? Rachel said, Jacob sponsored Kiddush? She said, all innocent, as if dropping the news by accident. Oh, yes, he made a large and extremely generous donation to the synagogue before he arrived. He didn't mention that to you? No. Oh, she stood up from her fiddling. Mission accomplished. Well, my mistake. I thought he would have said something considering how much time you spent together at Kiddush, the way he kept looking at you. Rachel blinked. Looking at me? Oh, Rachel. Her mother laughed a little. Even your father noticed it. Chapter 11's short, so I think we can do it. What time is it? Yeah, we have enough time to read chapter 11 too, so let's do it. Rachel collapsed into her seat on the Long Island Railroad, her bag in her lap, and she breathed a sigh of heavy relief as she made the return trip back to Manhattan. Shabbat was over. She had her ticket to the Matzah ball. She was going to save her publishing contract. She stared out the window at the dark night. The only thing she could see beyond the lamps and the tracks were the Christmas lights flickering on the homes in the distance. They were so beautiful. You could tell a lot about a family by the way they decorated their home for the holidays. If the lights were pristine and white, lined up in perfect little strips and lines, or a hodgepodge of color thrown up hastily around trees and bushes, neat or messy, they all made her feel warm. Odd, really, because that was also how she felt when she was with Jacob today. Gazing out the window, Rachel couldn't help thinking about how her mother had insinuated something a few hours earlier. Had Jacob really been looking at her during Shabbat? Were the feelings that she had experienced, those sparks of something like attraction and excitement, reciprocated by him? It seemed impossible, especially since this was Jacob Greenberg. But Rachel had seen a side of Jacob during Shabbat that she did not expect. He was charming and sweet, and he enjoyed complex thoughts and conversations. But the moment that had really thrown her, the moment that really made her think this man might have true romantic potential, was when he interacted with Paul. Men came with all sorts of qualities. Some had broad shoulders, large wallets, or a decent sense of comedic timing. But when she thought about walking down the aisle, she thought about standing beneath the huppah and getting ready to make someone the center of her world. She knew that she could only marry a mensch, a good person. A commotion at the end of the train car drew her attention, and a young couple had stepped into the car. They were clearly tipsy. It being Saturday evening in New York, that was obvious. She gathered that they were dating. They seemed quite friendly, hanging all over each other and whispering. She watched them from the corner of her eye, and the young man turned to her. Excuse me, ma'am?" he asked. Was she old enough to be a ma'am to them? Rachel didn't think so, but when she looked around the train car, it was empty, so the young man had indeed been talking to her. "Yes?" Rachel said politely, and he pulled his phone out of his pocket. "I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just taking a picture of us real quick." The woman held up her left hand and squealed, "We just got engaged!" "Oh!" Rachel stood up, smiling at the news. "Mazel tov!" "We're going home to tell my parents!" she screamed. They were a bubble of excitement, practically bouncing out of their winter boots. Their whole lives were about to begin. No wonder they were so wrapped up in each other. No, they were in love. And seeing two people in love was always magical. "Okay, smile big," Rachel said as she stood up and took their picture. "Maybe should I just take one more just to be certain?" "Thank you so much," they said genuinely as she handed the phone back to them. Rachel returned to her seat, staring back at the Christmas lights, and a ball of sadness landed in her belly. She was familiar with that ball, the never-ending circle of grief, the constant losses that came with her chronic illness. Rachel wanted to fall in love. She wanted to get married, to find her person, but who could love her with CFS? And what nice Jewish boy would want to be with a Christmas romance novelist anyway? Not that she hadn't tried. Rachel had tried J-swipe right on love plenty of times, dated someone only to reveal one small piece of her truth and be very promptly dumped. At nearly 30 years old and still very much single, Rachel had learned her lesson. Romance was meant for the characters in her Christmas novels. Love belonged to healthy blonde chicks with below-average BMIs. But Rachel was none of those things. But didn't everyone deserve a happy ending? The train approached Manhattan. The feeling of sadness was bubbling up in her belly and overtaking her again, so she texted Mickey, "Hey, you around?" He did not text back. Strange. But she reasoned it was Saturday night. He was either working, throwing some Jewish event as a part of his job as the director of social engagement for B'nai Shalom, or maybe he was on a date. Either way, she'd catch up with him tomorrow. She put her phone away and settled back into her seat. A strange feeling had worked its way into her chest, and she wasn't ready to go home. She wasn't ready to collapse into bed and stare at the ceiling for the next 4 hours. She needed to make herself feel better. And now, the train rolled into Penn Station, so grabbing her bag, she made her way out onto 34th Street. For Rachel, this was the epicenter of Christmas in New York, the place where Santa rolled into town every Thanksgiving, waving from his sleigh. Her heart soared as she found herself gazing into the store windows, the never-ending menagerie of Christmas displays. Tiny dancing elves wearing little mittens, singing carolers, their mouths pointed towards the sky, perfume and lingerie wrapped in red ribbons, the suggestion of romance, the promise of love, and a snowy Christmas morning, two hearts meeting beneath the tree. Her eyes landed on a smart beige cardigan in a window display. It had cording down the side and up into a full-turned collar at the neck. She couldn't help thinking, that would look good on Jacob. But just as quickly as the fantasy had come, it faded. Rachel didn't have anyone to buy sweaters for. She would be alone this holiday, just like all the others. Across the way at the ice skating rink at Rockefeller Center, it was so magical. The giant evergreen tree lit up between the skyscrapers, the skaters floating playfully across the ice below. She could smell toasted marshmallows and hot chocolate, fried dough and cinnamon. She walked to a booth where a skinny kid in a blue monogram shirt was working. "I'm here to see Santa," she said, slamming $50 on the table. "How many people?" he asked, unimpressed. "Just one." He took her money and handed her a ticket. "Merry Christmas." Rachel could hardly contain her excitement as she waited in line. She knew it was ridiculous. A grown woman without any children in tow waiting to get a photograph with Santa, but she reasoned away her strange holiday tradition with some certifiable logic. Santa had always been there for her when she needed him. Besides, who would ever know about her taking a quick little trip to the fake North Pole? "Oh, God," Santa moaned the moment he saw her. "You again?" "Listen." Rachel sat down on his lap before he could escape. "I'm sorry to bother you again, but I really need your advice." "Lady," Santa said, not at all sounding jolly, "I told you 1,000 times. I'm not a therapist." "I know," Rachel said, frowning and serious, "but I paid $50 and I waited in line for 45 minutes, so here we are just the same." Santa grumbled, "You really need help." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "That's exactly why I'm here." Santa sighed, but Rachel understood that this was between them. She'd seen it countless times in all her Christmas novels and movies. The grumpiness was just a front, and Santa obviously loved her. "Look," she said simply, "here's my problem. I like this guy Jacob. Or there's this guy Jacob, and I think I like him. The problem is, Genevat Diat." "What?" "I'm stealing his mind," she explained succinctly. "I'm making him think that I'm someone I'm not. It's totally what I did when he met me at what he did to me at Camp Ahava, which I guess is only fair and honestly totally dishonest. And maybe I wouldn't care, Santa, because of what happened between us. But grown-up Jacob, I don't know, he's so handsome, he's so kind. You should have seen him with Paul. He's not anything like that terrible little boy I remember, but can you really trust someone who was your summer camp arch nemesis?" "I really have no idea what you're talking about, lady." "I know," Rachel said. "I also realize you're not real, but this is really helpful for me." "Wonderful," Santa said. "I don't know," Rachel tossed the idea around in her mind. "Maybe I should give him a chance." Sounds like a plan?" Santa tried to push her off his lap, but Rachel refused to budge. "The thing is, giving him a chance means that I'd have to be honest. I mean, like, about everything. And being honest could hurt my parents. I mean, I asked my dad about it once. I was like, "Dad, what's the hakla around someone like Irving Berlin?" And, you know, the Jewish guy who wrote all those famous Christmas songs. And my dad went on this whole long spiel about the Talmud and the Shukla Aruk and whether or not a Jewish person could sell in a cross market. And basically what I got from the conversation is a solid no. "Look, lady, Rachel, Santa said, exasperated. "Can you do me a favor?" "Anything, Santa." "Can you maybe boil this all down to like 1 or 2 things that you want for Christmas?" He nodded at his wife, Mrs. Claus, waiting impatiently with a camera. "We're running a long line here." Rachel sighed, thinking over his question. I guess what I really want for Christmas this year is, a happy ending. I've been writing them for so long for other people, cheering everyone else along the way, but I think, for once, I'd like the world and the universe to work out for me. I'd like a happy ending of my very own." "Is that it?" Santa asked. "Yeah," she said firmly. "That's it." "Great," Santa said and angled Rachel's chin towards Mrs. Claus. "Then smile big for the camera." She's gonna make me cry. My God. Oh God, my heart. Poor Rachel. I know Santa is rude. It's true. Santa was very rude. But it's such a sweet, like, I don't know. It's a very sweet book. It's very sweet. I like it a lot. I wonder how long the next chapter is. I wonder if we could sneak through the next chapter. Hold on. Let me see. Give me 1 second, you guys. See how long it is. Yeah, we could do it. Let's do it. Let's just sneak through 12. Okay. Jacob found the key the superintendent had left for him outside and entered his bubby's dusty apartment on the Upper East Side, dropping his luggage just inside the door. The blinds drawn down over the windows, a plastic sheet covering the green couch. It had been 18 years since he last stayed with his grandmother in Manhattan, and the apartment remained unchanged. Jacob pulled up the blinds and opened the windows, letting in the sounds of 2nd Avenue. Light streamed through the apartment. By New York standards, this was a large apartment. 6 rooms that stretched across the 7th floor of a mid-rise building on 65th and 2nd had been in his family for generations. It was stuffed to the brim with bits and ends, fabrics, and artifacts from his father's side of the family, a collection of Chanakhoit littered tiny ledge of the windowsill and spread across every surface in the living room from there to the hall. It was a tradition in his family with his grandmother to spend Hanukkah together. They'd done it for years, first here in New York, and then in Paris, and then wherever their adventures took them. But for many years, Jacob had spent every Hanukkah in this very apartment. It seemed only right that upon returning to New York, he should return to the place that had brought him so many fond memories. He smiled, remembering, oh, I never pronounced this word right. It's a soufflot. It's how they say jelly donut in Jewish tradition. Powdered jelly donuts piled high on the table, the way the flames of the menorah looked, and the menagerie of gold and blue flickered through the windows. Jacob knew that there were far more important holidays in the Jewish calendar, but Hanukkah was still his favorite. Sufganiot. Okay. Sufganiot. Jelly donuts, basically, more or less. Delicious. He lifted up his favorite menorah, an antique. The silver had tarnished after years of oxidation, but the imperfections only heightened its beauty. 8 slender branches decorated in tiny swirling flowers wove up the side, while 2 lions stood on guard on either side. A dove was at the center, wings spread, ready to fly, served as the shamash. Every menorah in his bubby's collection had a story. The one he was holding came from Eastern Europe in the early 19th century, a time of pogroms before the Holocaust, but it symbolized all that was important to the Jewish people: faith, courage, and continuity. Jacob often wondered about the families who had lit these very same candles before theirs. Yakil, is that you? A wide smile spread across Jacob's face. Putting the menorah down, he swung around to greet his 91-year-old grandmother. In so many ways, Toby Greenberg was your traditional Jewish bubby. She believed in attending synagogue on high holidays. She overfed everyone who came into her home and considered it a shanda, a sin, for a guest to leave your house hungry. And she wanted her only grandson to marry a nice Jewish girl. But in every other way, Toby Greenberg was an exception. She had survived the Holocaust, hiding her identity while sneaking away from her native Germany through Europe until the end of the war. She had marched for civil rights in Alabama and hurled her heels into the trash cans for the feminist movement of the 70s. Toby would never claim courage, but when she lost her husband at 64, she didn't just curl up into a ball and wait to die. She met the next stage of her life with the zeal of a woman who had spent her youth fighting for the things and the people that she believed in. Look at you, Toby said happily before licking her thumb to wipe an invisible schmutz off Jacob's face. So tall, so handsome. I think you grew 3 inches since the last time I saw you. I'm afraid I have remained a steadfast 6 feet. Ah, she sighed. I must have shrunk then. Toby entered her apartment, breathing deeply as her black puffy winter coat was standing stark contrast to the white parachute pants that she was wearing. Jacob's eyes trailed down to the wooden slippers embroidered with gold and pink thread that she was wearing. They were completely inappropriate for the winter. How was Thailand? Jacob asked. Thailand? She asked, confused. Last time I talked to you, you were in Thailand. Oh, Toby said, thinking back. You're right. But then I heard about this fabulous little restaurant in Kolkata with the most amazing fish curry, so I decided to go to India. You went to India? Jacob blinked. For a meal? Well, India, El Salvador, and then Peru. I just flew in from Lima, as a matter of fact. Bubby dug her hand into a large black purse and pulled out a phone covered in blue and white crystals. You see, she said, angling the phone toward Jacob and swiping through photos. Thailand. Wait, India. Wait, I forgot. I did do a detour in Malaysia. They were having a dragon boat festival. Oh, Yakil, you should have seen it. It was just amazing. The colors, the people. Jacob watched her world tour unfold before him. There was a photo of Toby in Thailand riding an elaborately decorated elephant. Another in India where she performed a Viksasant, I don't know this word, in front of the Taj Mahal. There was even a photo of her at a bar, surrounded by men nearly half her age, sipping a green fizzy drink the size of her head. Toby was 91, going on 22. Finally, she landed on a photo of herself in Peru, standing on a beach outside of Lima, her short gray hair wet and sandy as she angled a surfboard against her hip. Bubby, you went surfing? What? Toby said, pounding her chest triumphantly. You think an old lady like me can't go surfing? Jumping into a squat, she rode an invisible wave. I will have you know I was wiping the ocean floor with those 20-year-olds. Oh no, I have no doubt, Jacob said gently. I worry about you is all. You kill, Toby said, rising to meet his eyes. The very best part of surfing is wiping out. Jacob laughed, pushing away his concern. He worried about his grandmother more than she realized, and it wasn't just her age that he thought. She loathed to admit it. She really was slowing down. His Bubby was his last real connection to family. His mother had died. His father and he weren't even on speaking terms. He didn't have any siblings. If anything happened to Toby, he would be alone in the world. Yeah, I want to be her when I'm 91 too, Avery. And the thought kept him awake at night. Jacob would never dream of stifling her spirit. She resembled that silver bird on top of his favorite menorah. To attempt to cage her under the guise of safety would be a death sentence for her. Toby Greenberg would live free and fearless until the day God himself decided to take her, and even then, Jacob was certain she would put up a fight. Come on, Bubby said, squeezing her grandson one more time. Let's get settled in, and then order some Chinese food, and you can tell me all about this fabulous Matzah ball. 4 hours later, Toby had ordered enough food for a small synagogue kiddush, pulling cartons of General Tso's chicken, vegetable chow mein, spring rolls, and more from a dozen plastic bags. She set up a smorgasbord across the dining room table. The food had come from Peng's famous house just 4 blocks away. Though years had passed and the management had changed, it was a pleasant reminder of his childhood Hanukkah traditions. Jacob sat down at the table, grabbing a plate and a spring roll. The taste of the fried wrapper was oozing oil, and it made his taste buds zing, recalling all those happy memories he shared with his grandmother. It reminded him of the way he felt when he first saw Rachel. So, Toby said, piling a plate of her own with food. Who is she? Jacob put his spring roll down. How'd you know? I'm your grandmother, she said with a wry smile. It gives me superpowers. Jacob felt his heart warm. His relationship with his Bubby was special, even if he wasn't sure how to describe his feelings for Rachel. There were too many question marks, too many secrets and mistakes made between them, and yet he felt drawn to her, his longing for those fun days of summer together going against his better judgment. Do you remember Rachel Rubenstein Goldblatt? Jacob asked. From Camp Ahava? Jacob nodded. Yeah, she was at Shabbat dinner this weekend. Oh, my. Concern stretched across Bubby's face. Jacob told her everything. He described meeting her at dinner, the strange way she shut down during Shabbat dinner only to tackle him in the bathroom and ask for a ticket to the Matzah ball. He told her about the shelves full of philosophy books and the easy way that she could quote Midrash and lead an entire congregation in prayer. Toby took it all in, listening intently before finally offering up her own version of the events. So you really like this girl? I don't know, Jacob said, exasperated. The problem is she's so secretive. You can see her thinking before she talks, and then when no one's around, she shows you this other side of herself. She's funny and brilliant and totally quirky, and I think I kind of like that. And the side of her when she's not pretending is like totally dynamite. So you do have feelings for this girl? Maybe, Jacob admitted, but I didn't come to New York to fall in love. The truth was, Jacob had never intended to run into Rachel Rubenstein Goldblatt over Shabbat. He'd certainly never expected to hand her a volunteer position and have her spend the next 8 days working beside him. He couldn't believe that he had been so easily swayed by those beautiful brown eyes. Everything felt on the line for Jacob now, not just his heart, which had already suffered so much, but even his business. The Matzah Ball Max was unlike any event he had previously done. It had a different clientele, a different feel, a different audience, and if Jacob messed up any one of those factors, it could bankrupt him. And yet, what he risked by falling in love was so much more than financial. He thought back to an old Yiddish saying, love is nice, but tastes better with bread. Toby raised an eyebrow in his direction. You worried about money? I'm worried about everything. Jacob didn't have the gall to bring up his father, the man who'd abandoned them both after all. The topic of conversation was always painful for him and Bubby. Jacob, Toby said seriously. If you like this girl... The same girl who broke my heart? Jacob interrupted her. The same girl who stood me up at the final dance of Camp Ahava, who left me standing in the center of the dance floor with a bouquet of wildflowers in my hand, totally heartbroken. I called her every day for weeks, Bubby. I sent her letters filled with scented stickers and poop jokes, and I never once heard back from her. She was 12, Jacob. Jacob stared down at the thorn-sized scar that lived at the tip of his finger. He received it sneaking off into the woods that surrounded Camp Ahava in an effort to pick out the perfect wildflowers for Rachel. He was even going to ask her to be his permanent and full-time girlfriend at Camp Ahava's final dance, and then she stood him up. Jacob. Toby rubbed around her own headache now. What is it that you want from this woman? Aside from showing up and actually keeping her promises? Toby smirked. Sure, aside from that. He thought about it. Well, I want her to be honest with me. You want her to be real with you? Yeah, Jacob said. If only so I could figure out my own feelings. Well then, Toby clapped her hands together. That's easy enough. Take her out for drinks. Get her to open up. I bet you could certainly woo a young lady with your knowledge of French wines. Yeah, I'm afraid my social time is over, Jacob said seriously. Once Monday rolls around, it's going to be nonstop work on the Matzah ball. Okay then, she said, not letting her grandson off that easily. Take her out to lunch. Surely you have to eat over the next 8 days. Barely, Jacob said, pushing his plate away. I'm hosting our investors and Silvers. My schedule is jam-packed with activity. Plus, I don't even think it would make much of a difference. I mean, I spent all of Shabbat with her, and the most she told me about herself was that she once watched a Christmas movie. Honestly, Bobby, I don't even think I've ever met someone so guarded. Maybe she really is a spy. Maybe I should just take the deal off the table. He picked up his phone and then just as quickly stopped himself, and that was the dual instinct again. He felt a feeling of uncertainty bubble up inside his chest. She made him feel unsteady, like his whole world was wobbly and he couldn't find balance, and he didn't like feeling that way. It really reminded him of sitting on the phone waiting for his father to call. I don't know what to do, he said honestly. Toby rubbed at the bottom of her chin. Listen, she's not the first Jewish woman in the world to spend too much time obsessing over nothing. Find a way to loosen her up. Challenge her to come out of a shell. Sorry, I had to prove I was a human. At the very least, you'll have fun with each other. That's really the best part of dating. We're not dating. You know what I mean, Yakil. She slapped him a little playfully on the arm. You could use a little fun, too. Don't be so serious about everything. Just enjoy your time with her. You're leaving for France right after the Matzah ball, right? Yeah, the next morning, actually. Well, then, Toby said, raising an eyebrow in warning. This may be your only chance. It is, Sloth, it is. Third email. From Rachel Rubenstein Goldblatt to Lisa Brown. Sunday, December 12th. Subject, Matzah ballin'. Lisa, great news. I'm back in the city now after visiting my parents on Long Island, but I think I found the perfect platform and person to garner some much needed Hanukkah inspiration for my new book. It's still percolating, but I'm starting here. Matzahballmax.com. And yes, your girl did snag a ticket. Let me know what you think. Rachel. Very cute. Very, very cute. I love this book. I think it's very sweet, extremely heartwarming. I love the characters. I'm super into it. Yeah, super, super into this. If this author ends up doing more stuff, I would definitely read more from her. Yeah, she's pretty great, actually. Like, I'm into it. All right, I will see you all later today. I will be back live here probably at 4:30, I think. We have a couple roll for slimes, and then I have to make some other stuff. She has a few? Oh, that's great to hear. Don't worry, Katie, I'll upload it shortly. Ray, I didn't know that, but I think we should definitely read other things by her. She's great. I mean, I love her voice. I love the characters. I love that it's got some, what do you call it? I mean, like, it's got depth to it, but it's not totally too serious. You know, it's really, it's like a nice balance. I really am enjoying this book quite a bit. This was a great choice. So thank you to Roxy for suggesting it, and to everyone who voted for it, because it really just, I love this one. I'm all in on this book. Yeah, really, really great. It's It feels good to read it. Yeah, it's a good feel. It's a good feel book. But we don't know what's going to happen. We really don't. So anyway, I'll see you all later for more Slimin' and tomorrow morning for more book club. And that is the whole kit and caboodle. She has Kissing Kosher too. Well, we can read that one too. I don't see why not. They all feel great. Yeah. All right. Bye guys. See you later.